Joining us now on the Deseret First Credit Union hotline is ESPN College Football Insider, expert and analyst Trevor Matich, national champion as well. Trevor, great to have you back with us. What do you think? Which BYU Cougar had the best weekend and why?
Squally Canada, because he made everything else happen. When you've got a freshman making his first start at quarterback, the best thing you can do is make sure he doesn't have to do anything with pressure on him. In other words, pressure to win the game. And Canada in that BYU running game established dominance and made it so that Critchlow had plenty of time. He had very little pressure on him to make the plays, and he just rode the wave of the running game, and Canada led the way for that.
It was interesting to watch this because I think Joe Critchlow softened the defense for Squally Canada, who then won the game for BYU. It was an interesting dynamic between the quarterback, running back. Sometimes most of the time it's the run game that opens up the pass. I thought it was the reverse.
Yeah, well, it's funny how all that complements itself, though, doesn't it? You know, when BYU this season, they've had struggles usually with both at the same time. But there have been a couple of times this year when BYU's running game just went off. You look at Utah State. I mean, they ran for over 200 yards there as well. They had a phenomenal running game, but 7 turnovers and injuries at quarterback and everything else, the passing game didn't contribute, and they lost that game. When you put it both together and you don't commit turnovers, it's fascinating what can happen.
ESPN's Trevor Matich with us. It's another Matich Monday. Was Friday night's BYU win more a validation for Ty Detmer's offense or Joe Critchlow as the quarterback?
I don't think Ty Detmer's offense needs any validation. I think it works when you execute it. And Critchlow executed it well. Now, once again, I want to be careful to not dump too much on the other quarterbacks that have played, because they didn't have either this kind of a running attack to support them, or there were the 7 turnovers, and there have been times when BYU's offense has been a turnover machine, and things have been a difficult scenario, a different environment for the quarterback. But looking just at this one, you can take this in a vacuum, and you can say that Critchlow was poised in the pocket. He was quite often accurate. He looked like the setting was not too big for him. And in his first start, he gave you every reason to believe that he can continue to grow from there. And that is phenomenal. I don't think it's a validation of Ty's offense. I think that it is a confirmation that when everybody is doing what they're supposed to be doing in a way that is at least relatively well executed, the offense can work. And so I think with Critchlow, he's got a great opportunity now. He's got 2 more games, and certainly he might not be the only quarterback that will play. But he's got 2 more opportunities this year to show that he can continue to take a step up and then another step up and then head into the off season as a guy that will really be the it quarterback from a buzz standpoint heading into spring.
Yeah, it'll certainly be interesting to see what he can do in 2 winnable games. BYU opens up a 3.5-point favorite against UMass. That's up to 4 right now. Should be an interesting matchup Saturday. Joe Critchlow, I didn't think made a single poor decision. I thought his decision-making was incredible. He didn't throw a single pick. He goes 14 of 22, 160, and a touchdown. What was the best part of what he did Friday night?
The best part was how he stood in the pocket and seemed to understand a bit of what he was looking at. Too often, BYU quarterbacks have been in the pocket appearing to look to find an open guy. And then when he found that open guy, then they'd throw the ball in that guy's direction. And how much of that is the quarterback not knowing how to read, and how much of that is the quarterback not trusting that the receiver would be in the right spot and therefore throwing the ball to the spot on time? I don't know. I think that's something that they know internally that I haven't heard them talk about. But from a standpoint of Critchlow looking like it wasn't too big for him mentally, I think that was the biggest part. Usually when you get a quarterback in a system like this as a freshman making his first start, you can tell that he's a little scattered mentally. You can see him drop back in the pocket, and then he's got happy feet, and he's looking around, and he's looking not just downfield, but at the pass rush coming at him. And you can tell that mentally he's not locked in the way a seasoned veteran with years in the offense would be. Critchlow didn't appear that way. Now, there's no way he's got this offense locked in completely. But it was clear that mentally he was processing information in a way that was relatively calm and relatively poised. And if you can do that in your first start, there's a lot of hope that you can do that better going forward.
ESPN's quarterback rating is something that we discuss often on this show with you, Trevor, and Joe Critchlow had a 60.5 on Friday night. With that one game of solid quarterbacking, how much of that is an indicator of maybe what Joe Critchlow can and will do as he seeks to be the number one guy in spring ball next year?
I don't know that one game is something to put on him and expect that to be his, what will happen next week and the week after that. I think from this perspective, we can give him too much credit or we can give him too much blame. Right now, because of the win, because of how well he performed, it's easy to say, yep, this is the quarterback of the future, this is the guy to beat. But again, he didn't face the problems that Bo Hodge and Tanner Mangum faced this year. He didn't face the same kind of defense, not even remotely close. He didn't have to deal with turnovers, although part of that was the fact that he didn't throw any interceptions, so he didn't contribute to any turnovers. He got a receiving core that had been playing all year long. And week after week after week, the receiving core has been getting good coaching. Sometimes we've seen it on the field, sometimes we haven't, but his receivers really helped him out. Like that touchdown that Olevehifo caught. That was a phenomenal catch. And that could very well have been an incompletion. And yet it was a confidence builder for the young quarterback. So he benefited from the receivers' development over the course of the season. And he benefited from the best running game of the entire season. So I'm not taking anything away from Critchlow. But I think from a standpoint of fans, let's just take a breath. Let's say this is a good start. It's very encouraging. There's a lot to be excited about. There's a lot to build on. But let's not crown him, Ty Detmer of his Heisman season quite yet. It's just not. It's just too soon for that, and it's not fair to the kid to put that on him right now after one game.
If you want to crown him, then crown him, Trevor. That's what I say. The words of Denny Green.
Well, you got it. Let's let Denny do that, but I'm not going. Not yet.
Yeah, I can't quote that full thing here on BYUtv.
You can't. But don't even do it in your heart because
exactly.
I think that's a sin too. Yeah.
Exactly. How much of what happened Friday was playing UNLV versus real progress in the offense?
I think a lot of it is playing UNLV, truthfully, because UNLV just isn't very good. UNLV's defense doesn't really do anything particularly well. But keep this in mind that BYU has played some other teams that don't do anything particularly well either. Utah State's defense, not that great. Lost the game. Gave up 7 turnovers.
ECU was the worst.
East Carolina. Defense, terrible. Everybody shredded East Carolina. Everybody but BYU. So I don't think you can say that any team in the football bowl subdivision is a team that was so bad that BYU shouldn't be able to roll them like they rolled UNLV, because BYU hadn't shown much of that either. And so I think that when you look at how poorly BYU has performed against some of the teams that they should have had great success against, and you compare that to how well they performed against this UNLV defense that they should have great success against, I think you can be encouraged because you can see improvement. Now, that improvement went from heinous to pretty good, right? But pretty good looks like a world beater when heinous has been your standard against some of those other teams, and they have performed in a way that has looked heinous in some of these games. So for them to have this feeling, to look at this on tape and see themselves succeed, to have a spring in their step going into practice this week, these are all things that are important to them, and I hope that they really enjoy them because they have not quit. This BYU team, that's the fundamental thing to me this whole season for all the bad things that have happened. These guys have continued to work hard. They've continued to play. They've continued to respect their teammates and their coaches via their effort, and none of them, haven't checked out. It's so easy to do that when you're winning, when things are going well. It's so hard to keep up that level of focus and that level of desire when things are going like they've been going for BYU. And I'm glad that they got this payoff because they deserve it.
Follow him at T. Matich on Twitter. Trevor Matich of ESPN with us on BYU Sports Nation. You were at the Auburn-Georgia game for ESPN Game Day, and it was quite the shakeup in all of college football on Saturday. So with what happened to number 1 ranked Georgia losing to Auburn amidst all of the other chaotic results on Saturday, how does that change the current college football landscape at the top?
Well, it's delicious chaos, isn't it? It just takes everything and makes it completely crazy, and that is part of the fun of this thing. Georgia, number 1, got blistered by Auburn. I mean, manhandled. It wasn't just a bounce of the ball here and there. Notre Dame, same way. Miami just dominated them. So that opens up 2 openings in the top 4. And so Miami from number 7, I think will go up there because they beat Notre Dame at number 3, and Miami is still undefeated. So Miami will be in the top 4 coming up. You think that Oklahoma, after they had a dominant win over number 6 TCU, would be the other team. So I'm guessing you'd see Alabama, Clemson, Miami, Oklahoma. And it might be Oklahoma, Miami. I think that'll be your top 4. The real big question here, or there's 2, is what do you do about Auburn? Auburn just crushed the team that the committee has said for the last several weeks is the best team in the nation. And they have a chance to beat the new number 1, probable number 1, Alabama, when they play them in the Iron Bowl in 2 weeks. I don't think Auburn will be in the top 4 in this ranking, but they have a chance to get up there with 2 losses if they can knock off Alabama, and I think they can beat Alabama, especially because of Alabama's injuries at linebacker. The other big question is Wisconsin. Wisconsin is still undefeated. They don't look on tape as good as some of the other teams up there in the top 4, not all the time. But they're getting better and better each week. Their problem is their schedule doesn't feature enough wins over highly ranked teams, and that's not their fault. They haven't faced highly ranked teams.
BYU's
so it'll
fault.
be interesting to see what the committee does with Wisconsin as an undefeated team.
Who are your top 4 right now?
Right now, my top 4 would be, and this is tough. I'd put Alabama at number 1, although that's shaky because Alabama's a different team now because of the injuries at linebacker. But I put Alabama number 1, Clemson number 2. I would put Oklahoma at number 3 and Miami at number 4.
Miami, Clemson in the ACC title game will be a play-in.
Yeah,
if they win
it very well could be. But see, if that game, if it turns out that would be another game that would open up a spot in the top 4, and that might be all that Wisconsin needs.
We just need a turnover chain for BYU Sports Nation now.
A turnover tie for BYU. I think that makes sense, right?
A turnover bowl of green Jell-O.
Shredded carrots included.
Trevor, awesome stuff. Thanks for the time as always.
All right, thanks.